All right.
Hello.
How's it
Hello.
going, Bill? Thank you so much for coming on. We really
No,
appreciate it.
no. I would my big computer was being updated, so that's why I couldn't get on. So I'm on the little computer, but I think it's okay.
Sweet. Well, no worries. We're in a really special set of circumstances right now, and we're all kind of getting used to Zoom. So, yeah. All right, everybody. Well, thank you all so much for coming on to this very special event. Philip, again, I want to thank you for your lenience with rescheduling. Last week we just
Of
had a
course.
really crazy last minute emergency, so we really appreciate your flexibility. So, thanks for coming on.
Has the ice melted?
The ice has melted, yes, thankfully, and it seems like almost all of us have had our power back.
Right.
A week ago
Great.
wasn't the case, so
Great.
thankfully things have gone back to normal. So
Great. Wonderful.
alrighty. So I guess the first thing I want to talk about is that you're notable for researching the power of a situation, and later on researching evil and heroism. So my first question is, I'm wondering what led you down that path. Were there any situations in your early life that kind of led you down into being curious about these, or did it come later on in your studies?
No, it happened from growing up in poverty in a ghetto in the South Bronx in New York in the 1930s, during the Great Depression, and there was evil everywhere. I mean, big kids beat up little kids. We were trained how to steal effectively from grocery stores at night, and it was just an environment it was a toxic environment, toxic physically, toxic psychologically. So, for example, when you were a new kid on the block, you just moved in, the newest kid had to fist fight the most recent kid joining the gang. And you had to fight until one of you got a bloody nose. And then the fight is over, and you're indoctrinated into the group. So imagine, instead of testing your intellect, it's you have to beat up somebody else or get beaten up. Typically, if the newer kid was much bigger, older, you were going to get beaten up. But it didn't matter, and it was and everybody, the other gang members it was called a gang, but they got around you in a circle and they're yelling and cheering and so forth. And while it was happening, I'm saying to myself, I was like, I don't know, 7 years old. I was saying how primitive this is. This is like the Lord of the Flies, but I hadn't read it yet. But it was just like that. So that set me on the pace of wanting to understand why good people do bad, evil things. And so I did some early research on what was called de-individuation. What happens when you take away your identity in a social situation? This happens at Mardi Gras, which we just experienced last week, where you put on a mask, and when the mask is on, it frees you, it liberates you to do things that are not normative, that are not usual. And so in Mardi Gras, it's usually to do foolish things, silly things, but it's also always implied to do sexual things. And what I showed in my early research when I was teaching at New York University in the Bronx, that simply putting women, participants in the research, in hoods and giving them the opportunity to shock other women, they were twice as likely to deliver what they thought were painful electric shocks to a woman they could see before them behind a one-way screen than other women who did the same task but were identifiable. So that started me on the path to understanding what are the conditions under which ordinary people could do bad things, evil things. And then ultimately it led to the 1971 Stanford Prison Experiment, which, by the way, next August will be the 50th anniversary.
Right. Fantastic. So the Stanford Prison Experiment has been turned into a movie with a movie called The Stanford Prison Experiment. I'm curious if you've seen that movie, what your thoughts are, and how you think it compares to the real deal.
Yeah, let me get rid of this thing over here, all this bunch of stuff. No, I was a consultant on the movie. I think it's a very good movie. It's about 90% accurate. in part because I was a consultant with the director. He was a young director. It was his first movie, uh, and we worked together. That is now the good thing is that they physically came to Stanford University, and uh, you know recreate. The study was done in the basement of the psychology department. So they came and they measured everything and they reproduced the setting exactly. I mean, literally to the millimeter. And then I have made available online at Stanford Historical Society all of the videos, all of the audios. And so the, the actors playing prisoners and guards, their script came exactly word for word from what the prisoners and guards did in my study. So it's a pretty good movie. I mean, the acting of the prisoners and guards is really Academy Award quality. So I like it.
Good to know. So it seems like there have been a few attempts to kind of create similar conditions to the experiment. One really notable one was done by the BBC. I'm curious on what your thoughts of any other attempts to replicate it, and do you think it would be actually possible to kind of replicate just like the premise of the study in an ethical manner?
Okay, first, no, first the BBC study is a piece of shit. Let's put it out there. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible move. It cost them $1 million. They had gotten in touch with me saying, would I be a consultant? And I said, no, because the only way this would be an exciting movie that, you're doing it as a movie to attract, paying customers is if the guards abused the prisoners and prisoners broke down. And I said, we've already done that. It's now unethical. And I don't want to be part of it if that's what you're going to do. And that, in fact, that's what they did. So the movie is visually beautiful because they had, the best materials. They physically created something that looks like a real prison. And what they did was they advertised, wanted young men for a movie about a prison. So everybody knew what they were going to. And then they had ads all over, like, so we're getting this guy from Wales and this guy from Ireland, and so when they came there, everybody knew about the prison study, my study. They all knew what they were going to get into. And anyway, it's simply a very bad study. Let's see. Now the other part of your question was, could the study be done again? No. I mean, the Stanley Milgram study and my study were clearly judged to be unethical afterwards. Now, in psychology, any research that creates stress in the participants is not allowed. So that you can't create a physical situation which is stressful. But now it's gotten more extreme. You can't even create an imaginary setting. So suppose I want to study the psychology of forgiveness, okay? And my participants are female students. And I say, I want you to imagine, even they're in a whole class, anonymous. I want you to imagine that you have been raped and we have caught the rapist and he wants you to forgive him for his act. And then the study is going to be, under what conditions will you forgive or not forgive? Even though it's all psychological, mental, you cannot do that because it produces stress in women just thinking about the possibility that they might be raped. So it really now limits very much what is possible to do in an experimental framework in psychology.
So next question. So you have some notable ideas regarding the state of morality in relation to human nature, which is kind of described in the Lucifer effect. Can you describe this stance? And would you say it's changed throughout the years after you kind of wrote that?
Just the role of morality in psychology?
Right, with the Lucifer effect specifically.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So after I did the prison study in 1971, I wrote a few articles about it, mostly to give my graduate students, they were senior authors, they needed publication. But for me, it was a little study. It was not a big deal. It was simply a demonstration of the power of situations and role playing. So honestly, I thought it was a nice study, but you know, nothing I want to hang my hat on. 50 years later, we're celebrating the anniversary of this most popular study in the most well-known study in all of psychology. Um, but but since then, there's really been a strong move to not just to do research that is moral, but to promote morality in psychology. Marty Seligman's positive psychology movement, which started 15 years ago, was part of that, to say, we don't want to have more psychology focused on negative things. Instead of studying mental illness, why don't we study mental health? Instead of studying war and conflict, why don't we study peace? So there's been a dramatic change in the focus of psychology, really away from negatives to positives. And so now people who studied the negatives in psychology, we did it always because then we could say, okay, how can we turn this around? How can we make prisons more effective and less destructive of human character? But people who study morality say, no, you can't create the negative situation in order to turn it around and say, how do we extract a positive message?
Yeah, no worries. So you mentioned the switch in psychology from, kind of studying things that are stereotypically bad and negative and evil to things that are more good. So you made the switch as well when you started studying heroism. Can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit about the Heroic Imagination Project? What inspired that? What the foundation of the project is?
Yeah. So when I wrote the book, so the first time I wrote in depth about the prison study was in my book, The Lucifer Effect. The subtitle is Understanding How Good People Turn Evil. And that book has 10 chapters on the prison study, day by day, what happened in great depth. And then it has a whole chapter on the ethics of the study and arguing, is it ethical? Is it unethical? And then there's a whole chapter on what happened to the people that study. We followed all of them up. Um, um, not only the prisoners and guards, but what happened to the people in my staff. Um, uh, and but then also in 2004, I became an expert witness for one of the prison guards in Abu Ghraib prison, where American prison guards tortured Iraqi prisoners for 3 solid months. And not only did it, you talk about sadistically, they took pictures of it, many, many, many pictures of it, videotapes of it, uh, and and this was then exposed. And one of the sergeant who should have been in charge of the night shift. So again, all of this abuse took place only on the night shift, and the sergeant on night shift was put on trial, and they wanted to give him 15 years in prison. In fact, the American Army wanted to use him as a scapegoat because the American image was terrible. And his lawyer contacted me to say, would I represent him? And I did. His name was Chip Frederick. I met with him. I met with his family. I checked his whole background. So he is an outstanding person, an outstanding young person, a really good person, and put in this bad situation. When he got there on the night shift, the other soldiers were already doing these abusive, sadistic things to the prisoners. And instead of trying to stop it, he went along. That is, I think there were 9 guards on the night shift, including, surprisingly, 2 women guards, which is very rare. And even the women guards did horrible things. So I was able, in a trial, to come to his defense and to say, Chip Frederick, Your Honor, is a model soldier, a good man, a good husband, a good citizen, who admits to doing bad things that he is apologizing for, is sorry for. And what I'm here to say is he never would have done any of these things had his superiors not put him in this terrible situation. So I gave a situational defense. It's the first time that a situational defense in a legal case made a difference. His sentence, I got his sentence reduced from 15 years to 4. He still went to prison. He still served hard time for 4 years, but 4 years is much better than 15. And so I talk about that in the Lucifer Effect, and then thinking about the positive side of this, the last chapter of Lucifer Effect is saying, we now know how easy it is for good people to turn evil. Let me ask the question, is it possible for ordinary people to become heroes? Now, obviously, the answer should be, oh, well, sure. But in fact, we all have an exalted conception of heroes. Heroes are extraordinary people. It's Nelson Mandela, it's Martin Luther King, it's Einstein, it's Madame Curie. It's people who've given their whole life. They become idols in every Rosa Parks. And so what I'm saying, yes, that's right. But what I'm thinking about is somebody who does a heroic deed once, that when the situation presents itself, they step forward and do the right thing when other people are doing nothing. So I just put that out in that chapter. And then what I did is I created a taxonomy of 12 different kinds of heroes with examples. And then I was not going to do much more than that. But right after that, I gave a talk at the TED conference. And the talk was the psychology of evil. And again, at the end of that talk, I said the same thing. Do you think it's possible for an ordinary person like any of us, any of the students who are watching this, to become a hero? And I said, now, we're not talking about comic book heroes. We're not talking about, extraordinary and international heroes. We're talking about any person here when faced with a situation where somebody is in need, they will come to their aid. And after I said that, at the end, someone came up to me and said, this is too important not to follow up because you presented it as just a conjecture. And he said, I want you to start a nonprofit foundation to study heroism. And I will give you, and he gave me a check on the spot, $20,000 to hire lawyers to start a nonprofit foundation, which I did. And so that started us in the direction. And with the money, I created a I called it Heroic Imagination Project because I believe that heroism starts in the imagination. I could be one. In the same way, when we were kids, we lived with comic books. And for me, it was Superman. But now it's kids, it's Rocket Man, it's Wonder Woman. And in our imagination, when we're reading the book, we imagine being them. We imagine doing what they could do. And now what I say is, wait a minute. Each of us has something that every superhero admires because we have what they don't have. We have a brain. In our brain, we could imagine doing anything they could do and much more. And the difference is we could make it happen. Every superhero is the brainchild of a cartoonist. And the cartoonist gives them one skill, to bullets bounce off of them. They could fly, they could swim underwater. But we can do all of that in our imagination, and we can do more. We can really make things happen. And that's what heroes are. They make good things happen.
Interesting. So, in your opinion, how can regular people become heroes? And how can people become encouraged to become heroes, in your opinion?
Well, it's a movement I'm starting. I mean, I've started now. And so I call it the Heroic Imagination Project, or HIP. HIP is the abbreviation, HIP. We started a foundation. Whoops, I lost you. Okay, so we started a foundation in San Francisco. And first thing we did is we developed lessons, social psychological lessons which means it's what I used to do in my classes, what I used to teach Brian Detweiler and Jerusha in my classes. I would also have videos and movies and Q&A and getting people to reflect on what they would do, put people in with pairs so that you challenge one another. So I put these ideas into lessons. And so one lesson is transforming passive bystanders into active heroes, active upstanders. Another lesson is transforming static fixed mindset into dynamic growth mindset. Our third lesson is transforming prejudice and discrimination to understanding and acceptance of others who are different. So we have these lessons that go for 3 hours long, and they teach people how to be heroic, how to develop the mindset, how to develop the behavioral orientation that's essential to do heroic deeds. Now, you can't be a hero until a situation presents itself, that somebody is hurt, somebody is in need, somebody is being bullied, you notice some corporate malfeasance. And so for me, a hero is somebody who comes to the aid of someone in need, aware that it could be a personal sacrifice, but also a person who is willing to challenge immorality, corruption, aware that it could cost you your job in the extreme. So to be a hero is always some cost, some risk that you take in doing the deed. But so our lessons now, we license our lessons to schools, to high schools and colleges, and now to businesses for a very small fee. And then in addition to licensing the lessons, I come as the trainer, and I train all the teachers in the school or school system that could use the lesson and how to do it effectively. And now, before the pandemic, I also literally went around the world doing training in Budapest, in Warsaw, Poland, in Turkey, in Bali, in Palermo, Italy, in many, many, many countries where they license our lesson. Obviously, they translate them into their language, and also they use examples which are relevant for their culture. And so our program is now, before the pandemic, was really blossoming around the world. But now it's a problem because without kids in school, our lessons have to be reworked to be effective online. Right now, they're a physical package that we distribute, which has the slides, the video, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I'm working on now. And then we want to have new lessons like creating eco-heroes, young people who challenge the impending climate disaster. And that's the main thing I'm working on now. Plus, the other area I've done a lot of research on is time perspective. And this also came out of the prison study, is that in the prison study, our sense of time was distorted because no one was allowed to wear wristwatches. There was no clocks. And we were in the basement, so we never saw daylight or night. And in a very short time, our sense of time became distorted. Guards worked 8-hour shifts, and it began to be like each 8-hour shift was like a whole day because so much happened on every shift. Now, as you remember, prisoners lived in the cells 24 hours a day. Guards worked 8-hour shifts. And so after the study, I became aware of how even I began to live in the moment, not thinking about tomorrow, the next day. And I started thinking about the psychology of time. I developed a scale, the Zimbardo time perspective inventory, and then we tested tested it in with different groups, different countries, and now it has become the standard. And there's an international foundation of time perspective, and we meet twice every other year in different countries around Europe, and so that's one of my most positive contributions has been creating a whole interest in the psychology of time perspective.
Gotcha. Okay, so a few people have directly messaged me, so I want to open it
Good.
up to questions.
Sure.
You have people just raise their hands, and I can call on people. Okay.
Yeah, if you call on them, I'd also like to know what they're majoring in and what year they are in at the university.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so Julia was the first hand. So Julia Monkarch, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Julia. I'm a psychology and French major, and I'm a senior right now. And I just wanted to
Senior, great.
thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for coming on. I was
Welcome.
really excited when I heard that we would have the opportunity to talk to you. So my question is about the Stanford prison experiment. I know that at one point in the experiment, you and other researchers realized that both the inmates and the officers had become really like involved in their roles, and you did at one point terminate the experiment in order to reevaluate the ethics behind the
Right.
experiment. I was wondering if you could speak on at what point exactly did you realize that you wanted to reevaluate those ethics, and at what point you terminated the experiment?
Okay, good question, but it's not exactly the reason we terminated the experiment. Um, the experiment was supposed to go for 2 weeks. Okay, and and um, and I had done a lot of research in my life. Almost all research in psychology lasts 1 hour. It's usually arranged to fit into students who are research subjects. It fits into a class hour. They come in, they do their thing, and they leave. This is a study that went 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So what does that mean? It means somebody has to be feeding the prisoners breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So that means you need a staff member going out to the cafeteria. Somebody has to be videotaping. Somebody has to be taking notes. Somebody has to sleep. And the problem is the study was only me, 2 graduate students, and 1 undergraduate. So we had 4 people essentially working around the clock. Well, we couldn't do that. I actually slept on a couch in my office in the 2nd floor of the psychology building. But still, so when I was sleeping, there were only 3 people available. Um, um, but as I said, at some point, one of the 3 had to go get meals. At some point, one of the my graduate student had lived on campus and had a child who was sick. So at various times he had to go. So I often worked 16-hour shifts, and it was incredibly stressful. I mean, just not sleeping, not eating well, being in this terrible psychological environment, and then observing the terrible things that was happening. Now, we never expected the guards to behave as abusively as they did. We never expected the prisoners to have emotional breakdowns, because we chose all of them because they were, in quote, normal and healthy. And so, as you know, within 36 hours, the first prisoner, I still remember his name, Doug Corpy, prisoner 8612, had an emotional breakdown. And I had to bring him to student health to have them check up. He may have stayed there overnight. But when I'm there, that means who's watching the store. So it was too stressful for the staff. And so I knew halfway through, I doubted we could go another 2 weeks. We had thought at some point after the first week to switch it so the guards become prisoners become guards. And then when we thought about that, we said, no way, the guards will quit. They're not going to do it, because they're getting $15 a day for work 8 hours. They're not going to get $15 a day for living in 24 hours. But what happened was, on Thursday night, we started on Sunday, August 14th. And as I said, August 14, 2021, is going to be our 50th anniversary. So it was Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So it's the 5 nights. My girlfriend, Christina Maslach, who had graduated from Stanford, was just got a job at Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley, as an assistant professor, was working in the Stanford Library, and contacted me to say, hey, sometime tonight after one of your shifts, how about we have dinner together, because we haven't seen each other for a whole week. And so she came down. It was at 10 o'clock. It was called a 10 o'clock toilet run. At 10 o'clock at night, the guards lined up all the prisoners to say, this is the only time you could go to the toilet tonight. After tonight, if you have to urinate or defecate, you have to do a bucket in your cell, which nobody wanted. It was terrible. But the guards used that as an opportunity to humiliate the prisoners. They put paper bags over their heads so they didn't know where they were going. They chained them one leg to the other. This is their idea, not mine. And they wanted to confuse them, so they put them all in elevators. They went up 2 floors, down 2 floors. The toilet was actually around the corner from our prison yard, but they wanted to confuse the prisoners. And they're yelling at them, they're cursing at them. And the prisoners now are like zombies, doing whatever the guard said. And so I'm watching this on our video camera. And when Christina comes in, and I say, hey, Chris, look at this. It's really dynamic. This study is working so well. As nobody's ever seen the power of the situation in such dramatic terms. And she begins to tear up and said, I can't look at this, and runs out. And I run after her. So now we're outside of the prison yard. And she said, I don't know what's gotten into you. You have been changed by this situation. You have a reputation. You love students. Students love you. And these are not prisoners. These are not guards. They are students. And they are suffering, and you are causing it. And I'm still saying, wait, the dynamics of the situation. But she said, stop. I don't know who you are. You have changed. You're not the person that I was romantically attached to. If this is the real you, I don't want to continue our relationship. So that was, bam, smack in the head. And I said, oh my God, you're right. It was almost as if like I was in a cartoon. I was awakened in the dream. And I said, oh, you're right. I have to end the study. It's out of control. And yes, I prevented the guards from physically abusing the prisoners, but I did not prevent them from psychologically abusing them. And I made the mistake of being not only the principal researcher, but I was the superintendent of the prison. And that was the big mistake, because I should have tried to hire somebody to play that role. So I could have just been an observer, and probably I would have ended the study earlier if I was observer rather than I was part of the setting. I was the superintendent. And so I ended the study the next day, and that summer, the next summer, Christina and I got married, and we are going to have our 48th anniversary this summer. And we're living happily ever after. Next.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, I think the next hand I saw was from Jinju.
Hi, my name's Jinju.
Hi, Jinju.
Hi, it's nice to meet you. I am a psychology student and a junior. Yes, and also I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming to talk to us. It's
I wish I could be in person. Next year I'll come and be in person.
That would be great. I would love to meet you in person. But yes,
Sure.
Thank you so much for coming. And also thank you for being flexible with
Sure.
The power outage last week. But yeah, so I just wanted to ask another question about the Stanford prison experiment, but more your experience with it. And I wanted to ask how you feel about the Stanford prison experiment being arguably the hallmark of your career. Maybe not the hallmark, but rather the most well-known aspect of your career. Yeah, I was just curious about how you feel about that, and how you've like, I don't know, come.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because it's do I want on my headstone, he created the evil prison study? No. I'm hoping they'll say he created heroes. I mean, the problem with the study is that, as I said, because it went day and night, and because we had videos of it, um, and we made a short movie afterwards, about, like a documentary we called Quiet Rage, that I made the movie with a student of mine, undergraduate student, simply to have, so that teachers would have material to use into a lecture. So that, but it gave it instant fame, because the video went. It was not a video; it was a film that we made into a video. Went viral, went around the world, and so it gave the study instant notoriety. And then, of course, talking about it in the TED lecture, Psychology of Evil, gave it even more notoriety. The TED lecture has almost 8 million people have seen that, the Psychology of Evil. So I have very mixed feelings. I mean, it's a good study. There's a reason why it's so well known. But on the other hand, I allowed college students to suffer much more than they should have. I should have ended the study after day 2. We had proven our point. But see, again, think about it. Because we had in our mind the study will go for 2 whole weeks, day 2 is only a short part of that. But day 2 is 48 hours. And most research is 1 hour. So again, by having this big frame of 2 weeks, then if you ended it after 2 days, it would seem like you're giving up. You're throwing in the towel. So.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah,
Next.
thank you so much.
Okay, I think the question comes from Vanya. I don't know how to pronounce her name. So go ahead.
Yeah, hi, it's Vanya.
Vanya.
Yes, I'm a junior and I'm a German and psychology double major.
Okay. So, what is your name from, Vanya?
Well, I'm Serbian.
Serbian. I thought so.
Yes. Yeah, but the name is actually Russian. And fun fact, it's actually a nickname for a guy called Ivan. Yeah. But anyway, my question is,
sure.
So you talked a little bit about how the experiment was problematic. So I'm just curious, how do you feel about like morals and the fact that this experiment and many others cannot be replicated, and many experiments can now not really be done because of ethics and the IRB and so on and so forth?
Right. Yeah, I have a very, very mixed feelings, because what it means is a lot of interesting questions can never be answered empirically. So how psychology differs from even sociology or philosophy is the empirical nature. That is, when we say our evidence shows, it almost always means someone has done an experiment of some kind, a well-controlled experiment, and the conclusion stands statistical tests above probability. And so what's made psychology stand out among all the social sciences is our empirical foundation. Now that gets threatened when we can't do these kinds of experiments anymore. And we can only do thought experiments to say, imagine you're a prison guard. And I in this setting, what do you think you would do? And I give you some alternatives. You're going to say, I would be a good prison guard. I would not harm the prisoners. I would be friendly. I would use the opportunity to teach them, because you can't really understand what you would do in a new situation. Everything we know about ourselves is a summary of what we have done in our past. Have we cheated? Have we lied? Have we hurt anybody? Have we been deceptive? Have we been a bully? Or have we been bullied? Have we been cheated on? So that at some point we're asking you, no, I want you to imagine a totally new situation. Well, what do you bring into the formula for you appraising yourself, how you might behave in a new situation? Most of us don't have the background to accurately predict what we would do. And so I'm saying, as I said before, that the sad thing is none of this research can ever be done again, zero. And that limits the reach of psychology. Interestingly, the newest dimension in psychology now is we've gone from cognitive to neurobiological. So now it's all in the brain, and we can study the brain, of students, of others, putting them in an fMRI chamber, and then we predict how they would behave in everyday life when they're not suffocating in a fMRI chamber. So it just, I mean, the other way psychology is changing for the better is in studying bigger pictures, like world health, or how people are adapting to the pandemic, or how you promote peace among warring nations. So on the one hand, it's more politically oriented psychology is coming out. Now, I should mention one other thing, is that the changes in psychology from focusing on negatives, violence, prejudice, mental illness, has come largely from the influx of female psychology professors. And many of them are the ones who instituted a focus on health psychology, peace psychology, psychology of compassion. So I think I don't know if anybody's done this formally, but it would be interesting to look at different decades in psychology, and who were the people who had a major influence, and it would have to be through their books, through their research, in moving the field in these ways. And my sense is it was a number of outstanding female psychologists. Next.
Alrighty. I think the next hand I saw came from Jonah.
Yeah, so I'm Jonah. I'm a sophomore, and I'm also a psychology major. And I was curious to see if you have any thoughts about the sort of parallels between conspiracy theories like QAnon, and sort of their effectiveness in society relative to your findings with the prison experiment, in terms of like bringing out the evil in an otherwise good person.
Yeah, it's a really big problem. QAnon is one example of the effects of media psychology on human nature, on the human brain. The problem now that didn't exist in 1971 is the media. That is instantly. I mean, people live on their cell phone. People live on FaceTime, on all these platforms, and people get bored, and you put out any shit, and suddenly somebody says, I agree, that sounds good, I believe that, and then you can even have people say yes, no, and suddenly you can create a movement around anything. And it'd be interesting to do a simple experiment. I mean, creating some strange idea, and suddenly see how people agree initially, because they're one of the reasons people join cults is boredom. Join social movements, you're bored. And I think right now one of the main consequences of the pandemic is boredom. Given you can't travel, given you can't visit friends, given in many places you can't go to classes, you can't do sports, so that many people now live in a hermetically sealed room of their own, a safe room. And so I think QAnon and other conspiracy theories can develop and spread very quickly. When we say the Stanford prison experiment is well known, it took years, decades to do that. I'm saying conspiracy theory can spread overnight, and within months can have 1 million followers. So we're still trying to understand the role of QAnon in the January 6th riots against the Capitol. There's a lot of investigations going on to try to understand how, who, why this happened. And the sad thing is that our former president, in various ways, encouraged this kind of thing. Encourages, partly not willing to say I lost the election. He's an egocentric person who has never lost anything in his life. As a businessman, he wins. And so he can't say I lost. The word lost is not part of his vocabulary. And so he stimulated people to say, at that moment on January 6th, what was happening? What was happening is the Senate was approving the votes of the Electoral College that had already determined that Biden won the election and Trump lost the election. But there's a final formality where the vice president oversees the Senate in simply counting the number of votes. And so this is what Trump wanted to stop that count, because in some magical way, if they didn't have that count, he would still be president. And in fact, he has said that Pence, his vice president, was a traitor by doing his job. And so in Trump's mind, by stopping Pence from going through his assigned duties, somehow he could maintain his presidency. And so in that sense, he clearly stimulated this group to go, who had authorization to assemble in some place, but to go to the Capitol to stop Pence, to stop the Senate thing, but we have now evidence QAnon was really part of that, major part of that group, and their focus is to stop the election vote by the expression by all means necessary. That means by violence, by murder, by mayhem. So.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Next, we have time for a few more questions.
Awesome. I think Sebastian was next.
Hi, I'm Sebastian. I'm a junior and a psychology major.
Good. What are you majoring in? What part of psych is most interesting to you?
Definitely clinical work.
Okay.
Yep.
And you're a Pink Floyd fan and a guitarist?
That's actually my roommate stuff, but yes, I'm.
Okay. All right.
So as an expert on the adverse effects of de-individuation and the situation, I would love to hear your take on social media as something that emphasizes identity and displays individuality as a constant context for this age of like digital socialization.
Yeah, it's a big problem. So that it's a funny thing is that on the media, people are posting images of themselves, posting information about themselves, students having followers. That it's such a strange concept to somebody like old guy like me grew up in a generation where students were anonymous until they did something either outrageously bad or amazingly good. Now any student can have an online identity, a picture of themselves doing things, certainly by having a more provocative, sexy pose can get followers. So now students want to have followers. In the older days, you just want to have a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a friend. And so now the media use now is transcending all of that. It's creating a sense of I want to be a star. I want to be a little star. And so and so you see the rise of these people with followings that I never saw before. Now, again, one of the negative things about the media is cyberbullying, that you can now humiliate people also to go on and say, the reason why Aaron gets all the good grades, he cheats. Or the reason why Jenny is popular with the boys is because she puts out. Once you put that on the internet, it's there forever. And even if it's not true, people don't know that. So there's also a kind of belief in the authenticity of this media. It's got to. So you enter it. So the same thing that we said earlier about the start of conspiracy theories. If it's there, there must be some truth to it. We begin by trusting the media more than we should. This media, and especially if somebody has their name associated with it. So it's so the media, unfortunately, is being used right now in many negative ways. See, the other part of it, there's nobody in charge of it saying, oh, it's got to be extreme before Zuckerberg says we're not going to put this on Facebook anymore. But that's after months and months of having horrible things appear about anything or anyone. Okay, thank you. Next question.
Okay, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it Kaya or Kaya? I think you were next, so go ahead.
I saw other individuals' hands up, but I can go.
Why don't you just go ahead and ask your question?
Okay, perfect. Hi, it's nice to meet you, and two, thank you for being here. I am a psychology major, and I'm a freshman. And
wow, just beginning, yes. Where'd you come from? From what high school?
I came from a small charter school in Los Angeles.
Uh-huh.
It's not very well known.
Okay.
But my question, actually, it's tracking back a little bit,
right.
But it's about your experiment. And I was wondering if you think that the findings of your study and the history of it would have changed if women were in this study rather than just men.
Great question. And to be honest, it was the experiment I wanted to do next. That is, after we finished the study, I met with my assistant and said, okay, let's try to do the same study. We'd have to wait till next year, because in those days, school ended in many places. School started after Labor Day, like September the 6th. And summer school typically ended in the middle of August. So we always knew there was a 2 to 3 week period where you had a lot of students available to be participants in the research. So, but I met with my graduate students. Okay, let's think about how we're going to do this. Let's set up the female prison experiment with female guards and female prisoners. But by now, so we wanted to do just what you said. And I had imagined that female guards would get into their role as male guards did, except they would not use physical force. They would be more psychologically sadistic, humiliating women, embarrassing them. So it would not be physical, it would be psychological. That was the prediction we made. And what I did was I went to somebody on the Stanford Human Subjects Committee to mention that. They said, no way. No, it's an interesting idea, but if female prison guards psychologically humiliated prisoners, it's still stress. And we're not allowing anybody, any researchers, even you, Dr. Z, to have people, students, stress unnecessarily. So they shut it down before we did it.
Okay, I think Mason was next.
Hello.
Hello, greetings. What year are you in?
I'm a sophomore and a psychology major.
From where'd you come from, high school?
I went to Sacred Heart Cathedral in San Francisco.
Ah, yes, I know it well, of course. I'm in San Francisco right now. I lived here all of my life, yeah.
Yeah, I heard it's hot there today.
Oh, yeah, good, fortunately, yeah.
My question for you is about the sort of the inspirations for the Heroic Imagination Project.
Great.
Now, I've heard that one of the inspirations was actually your wife stopping or confronting you about the Stanford Prison Experiment. Is that true?
Yes, yes and no. I mean, clearly that was heroic deed. It was, but that was 1971, and I didn't start the Heroic Imagination Project till 2001. Now, so her heroic deed was getting me to stop this immoral study, but it was not enough for me to change my mindset to say, oh, I should be doing research on this. I saw it as an individual. I mean, I saw it, here's a person who's done a heroic deed. And unfortunately, I did not back up and say, what does it take for somebody to do a heroic deed? What does it mean to be a hero? The problem was, after I did the study, I got involved, as I said before, in studying the psychology of time perspective. I also was the first person to study shyness as a self-imposed psychological prison. So those are two areas that I then began to do research on for the next 10 years or more. And it wasn't, as I said, it wasn't till much later that I started to think about heroism as the opposite of evil, heroic person as the opposite of a person who does evil deeds. So in fact, there's not a direct link between Christina Maslach's challenging me in a heroic way and my starting the Heroic Imagination Project. So unfortunately, she doesn't get credit for that.
Next question, Andrea.
Hi, I'm Andrea. I'm a sophomore and a double major in psychology and international affairs. So my question is, so Andrew already asked you if the study could be repeated today, and you said no because it wouldn't be allowed.
No.
But I guess my question is, if you knew then what you know today, would you still go through with it? Or more explicitly, do you think that what we learned from it outweighs the negative aspects of it?
Yeah, I have to agree with the second part, is that there's no question that prisoners suffered extremely, much more than I could have imagined when we started doing the study. But their suffering, we now know, is very short term. After we did the study, at the last day, I spent a whole day debriefing for 2 hours, all the prisoners, 2 hours, all the guards, and then 2 hours, prisoners and guards together. And then I brought all of them back a week later, and then all of them back a month later. And we followed them up. I mean, we had them send in individual statements, even anonymously, about what they were feeling, how they were doing. And so we knew that the effects of the study, even though they were dramatic in that setting, were temporary. They did not have any lasting negative effect on the psychology or physical well-being of the students or of the guards. And so the positive aspect of the study, meaning this powerful demonstration of situational control of human behavior, situations dominating personality, was a change in the mentality of psychology, because again, in the 1970s, psychologists tended to believe that personality was the best predictor of behavior. If I know your personality type, I could predict your behavior. And I was saying, no, you have to know the situation in which the person is living, occupying, functioning to predict what they would do, and more than their personality. And again, in the prison study, we measured the personality on standard personality scales of all the participants before they were even assigned to prison and guards. And so at the end of the study, we could see which prisoners broke down first, which guards were the most cruel, and try to relate it to their personality. There was zero predictability of any personality trait with being a good guard or bad guard, good prisoner or bad prisoner.
Awesome. I want to apologize. I think Kyle had his hand up before some of the other people I called. So
okay. Hi, Kyle.
Oh, that's fine. Hi, thank you so much for coming here. I'm a junior psych major and rhetoric and media studies minor, and I am interested in hearing some of your thoughts on, I believe it's social intensity syndrome, on describing sort of the military culture and effects it has on socialization. And I was just wondering, what are some positive and negative effects that you've viewed from that, and what are some possible strategies to alleviate and deal with those negative effects, if any?
Yeah, it's it's not something I followed up. It was an idea I got. I think it came out of working with the military at Abu Ghraib and Chip Frederick. It's that what happens when individuals organize their whole life around some themes, and their best friends, their buddies, are only people who believe what they do, who act like they do. And again, I thought about fraternities. Actually, in the old days when I was in a fraternity, fraternities are places where you went through the equivalent of boot camp, as soldiers do, boot camp. Fraternity, you had a pledge, and you got punished. You had to carry a club that you could get you would get paddled. They call it paddling. And so the idea was, it was very, very a male thing, is that male bonding was often organized around pain, punishment, humiliation as a threshold or an entrance into the organization. So everybody in the organization had suffered. Now, this is true in the military, going through, as I said, through boot camp, and it establishes a kind of intense social bonding among males, which is different than among women. So it's male fraternities versus female sororities. It's male military, and this bonding is stronger than, in many cases, it's stronger than the bonds that a soldier has with his wife or family, or a fraternity student has with other students not in the fraternity. So it's positive in the sense that it gives you a sense of identity. It's negative in that you become vulnerable to conforming to what we call emergent norms, that this group says this is good or this is not good, this is bad or not bad. And so it's just an idea I had, calling it the social intensity syndrome. That is, that men begin to want this intensity in their lives. And it's also true of soldiers when they come home. If you've been in war and you survive, you're happy to be home. But you know what? Life is boring. Life is boring. Same thing for many students after you finish college, if you're a student athlete, you get your first job, boring. so again, that you learn to say not say what you learn to feel. I need this bonding. I need this intensity. I need, and I'm going to get it more by being in male groups than being at home with my wife, with my kids, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is the idea. So it was really a study. We developed a social intensity scale that predicted males liking certain intense social situations that typically did not involve women. So it's a anti-woman orientation, but again a pro-male / non-homosexual orientation.
I see. Thank you.
Next.
All right. Next up is MJ.
Hello.
You're on mute right now.
I'm on mute.
No, MJ.
I'm on mute.
Oh, okay. Unmute.
I'm not muted anymore. Can you hear me?
I can. Now I can see you. Okay.
You're good.
Yes.
Can you hear me though?
Come back.
So as I would say, as like some people were talking about, like, let me take a moment to formulate this question, but how do you think your findings and the findings of many others in social psychology can be used to enhance the quality of justice, and in particularly like calls for like BLM type movements and other like mass pushes for a less retributive, more restorative forms of justice in the US? Because I feel that if of any field to have an impact on it, psychology, and in particular criminal psychology, or the psychology of those kinds of deviant behaviors, would have a big impact on that.
Yeah, it's a great question, but it's it's a broader question of how do we apply psychological knowledge of various kinds to promote, enhance social movements,
as well as, if you don't mind me speaking, racial justice.
Yeah, but that's a social movement now. I mean, and Black Lives Matter, racial justice. I see it. It's a new movement in terms of being prominent, vocal in the media, in our consciousness, and so it's not clear to me how psychology can be used as a foundation. Now, what we can do is, we know about recruiting people for different kinds of groups, good or bad. We know, for some of us, we know how to use the media in a positive way. We know the importance of role models, to have people speaking up for this. We've seen that already. There's not psychology. I mean, we've seen famous athletes speaking up. We've gone beyond that. We've seen, I'm a fan of the Golden State Warriors, and many of them have a uniform that say Black Lives Matter. Not on the uniform, on their jacket. And other places have that Black Lives Matter, on decorating the entire auditorium. So media psychology is taking ideas about how people could behave, should behave, and giving them visibility, giving them voice, and giving them physical visibility. So it's now happening without psychology being involved, as it should have been, should be, but it still can be. The problem with many social movements is, how do you give them longevity? Because concern for racial justice has been here for a long time. How do you keep people interested in it tomorrow? Because tomorrow there's going to be something else coming around. A concern for climate change. The thing that happened in Texas is clearly a sign of climate disaster, which is impending. I mean, around the world, Bill Gates is talking about it, but psychologists have not been talking about it enough. How do you create a movement of young people who are, I call them eco-heroes? What are all the things that young people can do to push off, minimize climate change disasters? So for me, that's a really important social social movement that has not gotten any traction. Okay, I think we have time for a couple more questions, and I got to go to dinner.
Got it. No worries. Okay. Next question. Tatiana.
Hi.
Hello.
It's nice to meet you. I'm very nervous to talk to you. But so I wanted to say, the Abu Ghraib prison, the prison.
Yes.
That sounds like a replica of your study. And I know that the abuse done to prisoners was very like feminizing prisoners, and there was like a lot of humiliation from that. And also I wanted to know if your if what you did, your experiment had any abuse like that, if it was involved any feminization, and also like what role patriarchy is playing might have played in your experiment.
What role? What was that word?
Patriarchy or patriarchy? I don't know how to pronounce
Patriarchy. Yeah. Okay. Is yeah, it's so male dominance is a problem. Okay. So in a funny way, in our study, the guards were acting like super males, super dominant, and the females actually were seen as, I mean, and the prisoners were seen as weak, like females. Okay, and at one point in the study, on the night of the 5th day, the guards lined up all the prisoners and they said, we're going to play a game. You, and you are going to be female camels. Bend over. You, and you are male camels. And you know what? The game is we want you to hump them. And the guards were laughing because hump means intercourse, anal intercourse, and also means camels have humps. And they say, do it now. And you know what? The prisoners who were playing the male camels got behind the others and they simulated sodomy in an experiment, knowing that they had forgotten that it's being videotaped. In Abu Ghraib prison, they did the same thing exactly with the Iraqi prisoners. They had them simulate fellatio. You bend down, you stand, and now imagine you're gonna suck his penis. And so here's an experiment, and here's real life, where there was no obvious connection between the guards knowing what we did in Abu Ghraib and our guards doing this. But again, it's not feminization, it's dominance. And males, the role in life of males is to dominate females in the usual sense of masculinity. Now, the other thing is in Abu Ghraib, what happened was there were female guards that it was never clear to me how that could happen. All the abuses took place only on the night shift, not on the day shift, because on the day shift, there were senior officers who came down to the prison. And it was the same prisoners, there all the time. But on the night shift, and again, I describe this in great detail in the Lucer effect. On the night shift, no senior officer ever came down. So that meant you could get away with anything you wanted because there was nobody above you noticing. And we show that the female guards were doing horrible things to the prisoners. There's this one where they strip them naked. A female guard puts a dog chain or a dog collar around him and was literally dragging him across the floor like an animal. Now, the other thing that happened, though, that nobody's talked about that I discovered is many of the night shift guards, not some, were having sex with the female guards on the night shift. Not guards against prisoners, guards against guards. And they was, again, it was this crazy mindset where they thought they were in a world of their own. Many of them took pictures of them having sex with each other. And I have copies of those pictures. The pictures are all, there was more than 1,000 pictures. There were videos that they made, and they're all now condemned. Nobody, but I had to have access to all of them for the trial of Chip Frederick. And, you know, I couldn't even look at them. I mean, they have videos of the guard, like it's like pornography, a male guard and a female guard having sex with each other, taking videos of each other. Now it's not clear that now see the prisoners were all males. It's not clear to me if some of those were Iraqi female prisoners, whether the guards would not have had sex with them, the American male guards. I would imagine after a while they did. Now, this went on for 3 months. The prison study was 6 days. That is, from the first time we have evidence of abuse until one of the guards blew the whistle. This went on every night for 3 months. So again, as I said earlier, partly the guards got bored. It's almost like, what are we going to do tonight for fun? They called it fun and games. So it's actually one of the worst scenarios in modern history of human beings psychologically degrading other human beings, night after night after night. Okay. Sorry. I mean, I don't want to end in this negative thing, so let's have something positive.
I have another question.
Andrew.
Want something positive?
Okay. Yes, please.
Go ahead and ask.
Who was your, I guess, maybe not favorite, but for the lack of a better word, favorite person you've worked with, and why? What is something maybe that other people have done that you're really excited about?
Oh, done with. Well, wait a minute. There's so much happening. Well, my graduate student at Stanford, who was the graduate student working with me in the prison study, his name is Craig Haney, Haney. And after he finished the study, he was a third-year graduate student. He went on to get his PhD in psychology and then went on to spend 3 more years getting a law degree from Stanford. So he's one of the few people who have a psychology degree and a law degree. And because of the prison study, he has spent his entire life, he's a professor at University of California in Santa Cruz. He spent his entire life working on issues of psychology and law. He's written many books. He's given testimony before the Supreme Court, how solitary confinement is cruel and unusual. And he's helped break that. Prisons no longer have solitary confinement the way they used to do that. And so he's somebody I'm really proud of. That is, he was just a graduate student in the study, simply making observations, we call it operating the videotaping, but came out of the study and saying, I see how terrible prisons can be. I want to do what I can to make real prisons better. Now, the footnote of this is when we finished the prison study, there were 700,000 American citizens in prison. And Craig Haney and I set up some programs to do education of prisoners to give courses free prisons. And I actually went to the head of corrections in California, Commissioner Procunier, to say, what can we do together to make the time prisoners are in prison more valuable for them? I mean, you go to prison for, now it's like 3 to 7 years. Can we build in programs that give them training, things they could do, learn computer coding, et cetera, et cetera. On this day, today, August 23rd, 2021, there are 2.2 million Americans in prison. I was upset when it was only 700,000. Now it's 2.2 million. So prisons have become, and of course, American taxpayers pay for that. We pay billions of dollars to keep all these people in prison for excessively long terms. And the only positive thing that's come out of that is most states no longer have no longer have death sentences. But short of that, on the average, you're in prison, I don't know what the average term is, probably 4 or 5 years from a sentence. And so you come out worse than you go in. You don't learn anything new. You learn how to survive because I won't go through the details. Prisons are a terrible place for anybody to be a prisoner because you'll get, new prisoners get abused by older prisoners. Young ones get abused by senior prisoners. And so that, to that extent, I failed. That nothing I did, or my team did, could reduce the impact that the social mentality of American citizens to say, put them in jail, lock them up, throw the keys away. And I should say, after I did the prison study, I went to Washington, D.C., and I gave testimony with ideas about how to improve prisons, how to improve prison conditions. And it's in the national record. And I must say, before I did the prison study, I had zero interest in prisons. It's not, I just chose prisons as a setting. It could be summer camp. I mean, it could have been summer camp with counselors and camp students. Okay, thank you. Last question.
Okay, so the last question is from Angie, who had to leave, unfortunately, but she messaged me. So her question is, can you possibly talk about how Heroic Imagination Project is working in the context of COVID-19? How do you see teaching people to not be afraid to help others in an era of social distancing?
Oh, it's a big problem. I mean, so as I said, our lessons are in a box. I mean, we license our lessons, and it's like a keynote slides. I mean, it's 50 slides, exercises, et cetera, that you license, and we send them to you, and teachers get them and show them in their class. So nobody's licensing our lessons because there are no classes in most places. And that's what I said earlier. So we have to think of a way to put them all online, which I just have to, hire people who help me to do that. But in COVID, given the distance we have, there are still bad things happening. I mean, there's still abuses happening. people still go outside. Before, you used to use a mask when you wanted to cover your face to do something bad, the mask man. Now people can go outside. And so in many places, many parts of the country, and certainly in Oakland, California, there's a lot of crime is on the rise. So COVID has not had any positive effect on creating more sociability. And again, because a lot of people lost their job, there's increase in robberies. People have to steal in order to get get money to get food for their families. And that's going to go on until everything goes back to normal, which is probably not going to be until next fall. Sad to say.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, if that's the last question you're willing to answer, thank you so much for coming on, Philip. This was a blast. We really appreciate your flexibility and for you coming on. So thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, all of you, for great questions. Good time. Enjoy the time you have. You're in the best place you could be with great teachers like Brian and Jerusha.
Oh, thank you so much, Phil. For
there you are.
I'm here.
Hello.
And Brian's here too in the kitchen making dinner.
Okay.
You're so generous with your time. We're incredibly grateful. And thank you to Andrew for the coordination and to all of the incredible questions. It's wonderful to have you here at Lewis and Clark.
Now the other thing I should mention, is that next year, 2022, the Western Psychological Association is going to meet in Portland.
Yay, beautiful.
Down the street from you guys. So we hope, we'll make it known. So it'll be the first non-virtual meeting. Last year we were supposed to be in San Francisco. This spring was supposed to be in Las Vegas, but it's all virtual. And we hope that Portland will be live and alive.
Perfect.
We want your staff, students, faculty, everybody to mob us.
Absolutely.
Okay. Take care. Ciao.
Take care.
I'm going to arrange a picture for that because that sounds awesome.
Okay.
All right, everyone. If anyone wants to stick around and talk about the club, we can do that. If not, you can all leave. It's totally fine. So.
No, you got to stick around, talk about the club. Come on.
No one should, but you can.
Okay. Hey, how are you?
Doing good. I'm really glad you were able to do this.
How come you didn't ask questions?
Oh, I came in late.
Boo.
I didn't know.
So what year are you now, Joel?
I finished. I graduated in spring. I just graduated in September.
Let me see the degree. You got it on the wall?
I don't believe him. I think he's full of it.